Hi, my name is Packy, creator of Pack Rat's Shack. I upcycle furniture, build out of pallet wood, finish interior spaces, and have a vendor booth for my creations. Welcome to my world. This video is on a neat little table that my dad left behind on his short stay in Indiana. He said he didn't want it anymore, so I went ahead and kept it, and I've been using it as is for many years. But in the last several months, I really did grow a design concept that I wanted and planned for this table. And now that my move to Tennessee is right around the corner, I really need to get this table done and get something fresh and new in my booth before I leave. The tabletop has water damage and flaking veneers, which is really too bad because you can tell this was a beautiful table. The rest of the table seems like it's in good condition, and I just really love all of the little detail works and the ball and claw feet on this piece. I started off with scraping all of the loose pieces off of the tabletop and then continuing on with sanding. I knew that this was going to be a challenge because I knew I was going to be sanding through that top veneer and into the wood layers underneath it in order to get it flat again because of the swelling from the water damage. It wasn't a huge concern to me because I knew I would be painting this piece, but I also knew that the marking left behind between the underneath wood and the actual veneer wood that could still possibly be seen through the painting. So I knew that while I continued prepping this piece with scuff sanding the legs and the base and cleaning it all up, that I was going to have to continually be thinking about plan B and possibly plan C in order to make my design concept work for this piece. Also, I must tell you that during this video you might be hearing a lot of background noise. I've tried to cut it out as much as possible, but I'm basically moved out by this point, and you'll hear even the new homeowners are bringing loads over and moving stuff into the basement for storage while we all just wait for the possession date, which is probably less than a week away at this point. After I was done with all the prep work on this piece, I went ahead and moved it upstairs so that I'd have better lighting. Therefore, I could make sure I was getting full coverage while I painted the piece. I started painting it in the upside down position with a good couple of coats. This allows me to get into all of those nooks and crannies that you can't really get to from the correct furniture position. Here I'm using the Krylon furniture and cabinet paint in tricorn black. I want to make sure that I get all of these beautiful details filled in but not clogged up. So this will be taking several thin coats in order to get full coverage. After I think I have everything filled in from the upside down position and turn her right side up, I continue on with another 2 thin layers of the tricorn black. I'm adding this decoupage rice paper that I got specifically for this table. But I got a little bit ahead of myself. I now see that the thinnest area loosened up with the moisture of the paint. So I started to try to gently remove it, planning to fill it in with wood filler for a more solid surface, but it was splitting back too far and I didn't want to cause further damage. So I then attempted to glue the edge down, holding it into place with anything that I could find weighted. As I said earlier, I'm basically moved out by now, so a lot of my supplies and tools are already gone. I'm just scrambling to find what I need. I then clean out the groove details circling the top of the table. While the top is drying, I switch gears so I can have a little bit of fun with these ball and claw feet. I'm brushing on some of the Rub and Buff gold gilding wax to the ball sections of these feet. Well, the glue held down, but not necessarily evenly. It is dried down solid. I can't lift the edge with my finger now, so I'm trying to fix some of these imperfections with wood filler. Here, I'm sanding and cleaning the excess off. And of course, every time I work along that groove detail, I have to clean it out by cutting or scraping the material back out again. But now with the final scuff sanding and good thorough cleaning done, I believe I can finally paint in this decoupage design. I use a brush to get down into that groove, but then I'm using different techniques to apply the paint to the surface. I don't want brush marks left behind in this design concept, so I'm trying to mimic the textural look of that rice paper. I'm mainly using tricorn black, but because there's some different depths and richness in the decoupage design, I'm also using a dark cocoa color and a minimal amount of a white. I'm using the rag technique to further blend these colors in. Well, this area is proven to be quite troublesome. Even though it's being held down solid and I can't lift the edges with my fingernail, it's just not smooth enough, and the paint actually enhances the imperfection. You can see that even though the coloring is blending in well with the decoupage design, there is still just a very noticeable edge to that rice paper. I think adding some texturing will solve both of these issues. I just used Dixie Belle Sea Spray in with the black paint, being that that is the primary color being used. After I get the consistency that I'm wanting, I roll it on to get it onto the surface, but then I'm trying different techniques until I get the look that I like. This wax paper really seems to mimic the textural look of the rice paper the best. I think that will do quite nicely. But I do have to clean off the edge of the table as well as clean it back out of that grooved detail. Before continuing on with the painting, I do a quick sanding to the overall top. This is just to knock back any excessively high bits or chunks that are left behind. I do work a little more on softening the blend of the texture as it meets the rice paper, and I'm still tidying up that decorative groove along the top. Now it's time to blend the tabletop back into that decoupage paper. Now we're getting into a big gap left in the footage of this piece. It seems I have a problem correctly activating the record button. But as you can see, the tabletop turned out beautifully, and I continued on with sealing the piece in. I started off with using the Minwax polyacrylic in satin. This worked beautifully for the legs and the base, and I did several coats. But when it came to the top, it looked really good for the first coat, but after the appropriate dry time passed and I put on a second coat, I must have put it on too thick because it made that top cloudy. The big blunder here is that I'm simply out of time. I'm leaving for Tennessee tomorrow and I need to be packing up my vehicle for the trip. I simply don't have time to sand everything back and reapply the color blending again to start a whole new top coating process. I guess I'll just have to get back to it in a week when I return to Indiana to get my last load. Yeah, like that happened. Those of you who've been following me know that I never made it back to Indiana. So this table has been sitting in storage ever since my mom had to finish moving out the rest of the pieces all by herself. So now we get to fast forward about 3 months and I'm finally able to make a trip back to Indiana. And this table really needs to get done. My booth has been suffering because there's been nothing fresh in it since I've left. First, I go retrieve the table from where it's being located at. Then I set up a work zone in my daughter's house. And I start recording that whole process of scuff sanding the top back so that we have a good bite for the new paint layer to stick to. Mind you, this is the 3rd time that I'll be color blending that tabletop back into that decoupage design. And I do get it all looking good again, only to discover the record button wasn't properly activated yet again. This is my biggest nemesis. It happens too frequently. And I'm not gonna go back and color blend it a 4th time just to show you that. I mean, if you absolutely need to, you can rewind and watch color blending number 1 or color blending number 2. They're all basically the same. Anyway, I huff to myself about accidentally not recording it again, and I walk away to let it dry, only to come back later to find out a bunch of kitty paws are on top of it. At first I'm like, oh no, not again. But then as I started to wipe it clean, I realized the paint had already dried completely before the kitties had gotten on top. Anyway, I moved my workstation to another room where I can shut the door when it's in its drying time. This time I'm using Dixie Belle's Clear Coat Protection and I'm applying it with a blue applicator sponge. As I'm applying it, I decide to go in circles with the tabletop because this seems to eliminate the application marks. Now I can walk away and shut the door and know nothing's gonna happen to this piece. And I continue to layer on 2 more coats of protection with the proper drying time in between. Bada bing, bada boom, we're finally done, right? Wrong. Wrong again. We are not done yet. So I think I'm done, and I'm going to transport it to the booth and then head back home to Tennessee. But I did stop and have coffee with a friend on the way. While we were out at the vehicle saying goodbye, I decided to show him the table, and I popped the vehicle open and smack, right in the face. I could see wood tones through the 4 layers of black tricorn paint on the legs. And I'm just like, I can't sell this piece like this. With that being said, my plans were changed. I'm not headed back to Tennessee after all. I really need to get this table done and into the booth. So I head back to my makeshift work zone and I layer on several more coats of tricorn black, using a flashlight to make sure I get full coverage. Well, actually, I did have to scuff sand the whole base and legs first. Eventually, I got my full coverage, and after the proper drying times, I was able to layer on the polyacrylic satin clear coat. With the air conditioning going, there was plenty of dry time in between my coats, but it was rushing it compared to what I usually like to do. The next morning I got up fairly early in order to put on the last coat of my polyacrylic spray, protecting the top from any overspray getting on it, and then I waited a few hours for the store to open. Finally, I was able to deliver my piece to the booth and head back to Tennessee. And I'm sure there are many of you out there who are like, I don't care about any of that. And that's fine. I'm just saying it was quite an ordeal for this little piece to go through. And I thought I'd share it with you because some of you have to feel my pain. I mean, somebody out there feels my pain, right? Anyway, I wasn't back home in Tennessee for very long with my head plunged deep into all of the projects around here that I got word that that table's sold. So it was all as the journey meant to be. It was how things were set in motion for it to get to the booth at the timing that it got to the booth for the next person who wanted and needed it to see it and buy it. And since I really loved this piece and I loved the design concept that I created for it, I really didn't want to sell it. But since I had to, because I can't keep everything and I have no space for it, I'm hoping that it found its forever home and that the person who bought it loves it as much as I did. Well, that wraps up the journey that this table went through. I hope you enjoyed at least something in this video. And as always, I do really appreciate your viewing support. And until next time, stay safe out there.